Okay, we should be. Thank you. Okay, obviously we're now being recorded, and this is Bob Wiley. I'm doing a demo on how to make an Inro. Now, a little background on Inros. Inros were started in Japan. They did not have pockets, and so they had to have some sort of a means of carrying small items. And so they would make these little boxes, if you will, that had cord on them. And they would run the cord under their belt, and then they had some sort of a catch on the top. They would catch the top of their belt, and they would then have a little box. They could put small coins or pills or any number of things in them. This particular one I made some time ago, um, and I made it for my wife using some molds I got from Penny Joe. It came out quite nice. And see, the idea of the Inro is that it does open up and it's hollow inside. So you can do a lot of things with it. And I'm going to turn up my light just a little bit so we get a little more light on there. Now, obviously, to make the Inro, I needed some sort of a base to start with. And having played around for a bit, I decided to take a toilet paper roll, that is right off the toilet paper. And the first thing I tried was to take an oval cutter, and this one just fits the toilet paper roll if I'm very careful with it. You'll probably have to take my word on that at the moment, because I don't want to just spend too much time doing this. But I can well, sometimes I can get it inside, sometimes it goes outside. But anyway, the toilet paper roll and this oval are about the right size. Unfortunately, when I used that to make an Inro, it came up rather large. It made this Inro. Now, if you compare this one with the one from my wife, you can see that it does make a really, really large Inro. And so that I didn't like. So I tried something smaller. And really all I ended up doing was taking the roll of toilet paper, cutting it down one of the seams. I've got one here that I've done that too. I only cut it down a seam and lost a fight with it. Cut it down one of the seams. And you'll just cut it here, down here, and then folded it and put it inside the next size smaller oval. So I took the smaller oval and put this roll inside of it. And I'm going to have to do that in part two. Once I got the oval shape I wanted, I cut a flat piece of cardboard that would go inside my tube and force it to hold an oval shape. So now I have a nice oval shape to it. And I will take that, and the easy thing to do is to then just wrap a piece of black clay. I've run this through the POS machine on a medium setting to get kind of what I'm looking for. I don't need something really thick at this point. I just need something that'll go around the roll of toilet paper. So once I've done that, get it wrapped around there, and that one is not going to work. Excuse me while I run it through the POS machine one more time to get a slightly longer strip going for me, because it's not going to wrap around there. And I'm having a battle with my other piece of toilet paper, or my other roll of toilet paper, which we will have to deal with in just a few minutes anyway. Once more through the POS machine. Okay, there we are through the POS machine. Now I've got a sheet of clay that should be long enough. I wanted a flat edge on that and a sharp edge on this side. And now I'm going to once more wrap it around my roll of toilet paper. I do put the seam right along the extreme edge of the oval, because that is where I'm going to do a lot of things to cover it up. And so it's kind of nice that way to put it out there. And he said, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, once more through the machine. Okay. There we go. Now we got it down to where it's supposed to be. Line it up on the edge. Run around the tube once. Get a good mark. You can see your mark. Cut it off. There. Wrap it around. Bring the seams together. Now, this is going to be a weak spot when it bakes, so keep that in mind that you want to get this sealed really well right along this where these two come together. You can stretch it a little bit. Try not to put too much stress on it, because as you stress the clay, it's going to try to shrink when you bake it, and that can cause some seams to open up if they're not well sealed. Fingernails are great items for sealing the seam. And now I've got a rag. You can see I've got a rough top on this, so I'm going to decide how tall I want it. See if I've got something I can measure against. Not quite. So we're just going to have to eyeball it. And I really want to get a horizontal cut. So I'm trying to hold my blade steady and just turn this thing in my hand and come up with a very nice horizontal cut, or as close as I can get it to that. And I did a fairly good job. Okay, that is the base, or the biggest portion for the Inro. The outside, and there's actually going to be the inside of the Inro. I now need to put a base on it. So I'm going to just put it on my black clay and take my clay blade, or an X-Acto actually, hold the tube down, just cut around the outside. And again, there are no points for neatness at this stage, because we're going to use our fingers to kind of smooth things out and put things together. And this is going to be buried inside the Inro. So if you're not overly neat, you're okay. Pick everything up, get it off there. There we go. And you can see I didn't do a good job cutting, but that's okay, because I can always come back and trim it up in a minute as I seal things down. And I can see that I really do need to cut right along here. Get rid of some of the excess clay. And then just seal it to the edge so that I get it sealed, well sealed, all the way around the piece. So that my base and my sides are sealed together. Again, fair use of the fingernail. A little roll here to smooth things out that seem a bit rough. And I've got this piece ready to go in the oven, and I will bake it just like this with the tube still inside so that it holds the shape while it's baking. Now, I'm going to put that in the oven, and through the magic of video, when I take it out of the oven, it actually is a smaller piece, I know. But this is what it looks like when it comes out of the oven. This one, it will stick a little bit. I actually thought about putting some cornstarch in there. I can take the inside, the guts out. Thought about putting some cornstarch in there to keep it from sticking, but it's not too bad. By the way, I did put some Scotch tape on this to seal it. Some people have said masking tape is better. I'll leave that up to the individual. So anyway, I've got this out of my tube. You can see my tube is now fairly nice. It needs a little bit of a trim job because I didn't make this one overly carefully. Clean a few things up. Now I found out at this point, I want another layer of black clay around this. And the reason for that is if I just put the outside on, it sometimes is a little too thin and doesn't have enough support, especially for the cap, because you realize the cap on this has got to be able to come off. And if it's too thin, then there's no structure for the cap and it's going to get a little wobbly. So what I'm going to do on this particular piece is to put another thin layer of clay around that. And I'm going to make a cap on that thin piece of clay. So I condition our black clay. And this is going to have one really tricky part on it that I will tell you about as I go. Okay. So I've got my black clay conditioned. I don't need anything on the base. The base is fine. I'm just going to give myself a straight edge here for reference and a straight edge on this side to make sure I get a good clean edge over there. And I hope I've planned this carefully. Otherwise, we get to play another game with a pasta machine. I'm wrapping it around, lining it up with the base and pushing it down. And I really am having trouble eyeballing spacing today for some reason. So we go through the pasta machine one more time. Sorry for my viewing audience. Sometimes I can eyeball this and sometimes I can't. And this is one of those days where I cannot. That should be more than enough to play with. I'm going to leave myself a rough edge on the bottom this time, so I'll have to clean it up when I'm done. But once more, we wrap it around the cylinder I've got. Make my mark. Cut along my mark. Bring things together, and now I've got to have to be very careful what I do next. I want to bring the seam together, but on the other hand, I also need to realize I am I'm making that top cap. And so to make the top cap, I've got to cut the piece I've just put on there so that it forms the cap I'm looking for. So I'm going to come down a ways, and this is just eyeball personal preference. Come down a ways, and again, try to keep things fairly constant as I'm cutting this thing. Finish my cut there. Okay. I'm going to very carefully peel this piece off. He said very carefully, having cut all the way through. Sure, he cut all the way through. You know how things never go right when you're doing a demo? They always go right when you're playing at home, but never right when you're doing a demo. Okay, that piece has been cut, that strip has been cut off. I'm now going to seal my seam over here. Get that all nice and clean, taken care of. I'm going to clean up the bottom a little bit, the base, because I hadn't done that with that piece of clay. Get things nice and smooth down, so I've got a nice seal all the way around. Now comes the fun. Because I want to bake this, I need to bake the cap on it, but I don't want the cap to seal anything when it bakes. And I found this wonderful thing called Repel Gel. Probably can't see that. There we go, Repel Gel. It's a Kato clay product, a Van Aken product. I used to pick it up at Hobby Lobby and Joann's. I have not seen it there for a while. It is a very gooey gel-like liquid. And I'm going to simply use my finger, and they probably recommend a brush, but I have a habit of using fingers. OSHA probably is going to have a fit if they find out I'm using my fingers, but so don't tell them, please. I'm going to put it all over the clay where I don't want my top cap to stick. So this is actually a release agent. So it keeps the clay from sticking to clay. Even raw clay won't stick to raw clay if you put that on it. At least that's been my experience. Now I'm going to go back and put the top back on. And I am putting it down all the way down against the base. Getting everything lined up, getting the seam sealed. Got it there. And then I'm going to give it just a little bit. I don't know if you can see, I'm putting about 1/8 of an inch space, pulling them apart. So there's about 1/8 of an inch space in there, because I'm not sure I've got enough Repel Gel on the raw clay on the base to keep it from sticking to the base. So if I put just a little bit of space in there, then I won't have that problem. And I get a nice, and the top will then hold the shape of the oval shape I've got for the Inro, and should be a nice snug fit when I take it out of the oven. So I will now put that in the oven and bake it. While it bakes, I'll put the cap on my Repel Gel, and then I will take it out of the oven. That is one very fast oven I have. And with a little bit of work, I can work it free. It sometimes takes more effort than others. And sometimes I find I need to put a blade in here and break it free a little bit. I try not to cut things too much. And so what I will do after that, after I've got it somewhat free, is take a little piece of cardboard and put it in that gap I've created and run it around once, and it will break free. And once you've got that done, it should come off fairly easily. Now this works best if you open it up when it is still warm out of the oven. And I don't know if you can see you can see some of the residue of the Repel Gel on here. To get rid of that, I have some 800 grit sandpaper. I'm just going to gently sand that off, so I get rid of that residue. I know this is about as much fun as watching paint dry, but it's the step I got to do to get things to work after this. Okay, that feels good. Sand the inside of this guy so that I get the residue out of there. Doesn't take much. It does come off fairly easily. Okay. And now I should be able to put them back together. And you can see, oops, you can see it. It's a snug fit, but it does go on. So that's good. Okay, that's the way it had it on upside down. Now I got it on right side up and it fits. You can see it is almost a perfect fit, which is good. I do want to put a cap on this. And so now knowing which side is up, we'll go back to my clay. Get some black clay and repeat the process for putting a cap on there, which again, you just cut around it, get a piece, glue it on, or attach it, and you're off and running. And that I don't bake at this point. But now what I've got is I've got the base for my Inro. So now I can decorate it any way I want to. Obviously with this one, I took molds and some, something I made bark and put a mold over the top, use molds to create the little critters in there and the leaves and whatnot. With this one, I actually took a faux mother of pearl that I'd made and covered it in faux mother of pearl. Having done that, I keep looking at it thinking it needs something else. I'm probably going to put a gold medallion or something down here because it does need something else. What I thought I would do today is to cover it, do a silk screen and cover it that way. Now, if you haven't done silk screening before, I've got a piece of turquoise clay this time. I'm just going to demo the silk screen because we're just going to do a quick demo. I've got a silk screen here. It has a shiny side and it's got a dull side. The shiny side is shiny because it's got a thin gel on there. And so if I put the shiny side down and press it in carefully, now the gel is actually put just a very smallest gap between the silk screen itself and the clay. So when I put paint over that, it'll set in that little gap and I'll get an image on my clay from the from where the screen pokes through or where the image pokes through the screen. I want to make sure nothing moves while I do this. So I've got some painter's tape. Masking tape works just as well. I'll put it on 2 corners, hold it down, make sure nothing's going to move. And then I've got a tube of Golden's. This is iridescent fine bright gold. You use whatever color you like. I tend to be into gold and pearls, so this is perfect for what I want to do. Dab a little bit of the paint on your screen, and you can either use a credit card, like the one I've got here that has expired, or if you buy one of the Sculpey silk screens, you will find this little tool in there. They do the same thing. You want to keep it just a little bit, not perpendicular, but almost flat, and press down and pull across your screen, and that'll spread the paint and force it into all the little gaps in your silk screen. And you get it through there, get everything covered, make sure you've got it covered well. My clay didn't fully cover everything, so that's going to be a bit of a problem. But Now I can take my tape off. That, lift my silk screen off, and you see there's my image. Now, I have a glass of water handy. Immediately put your silk screen in the water. If that acrylic paint dries on the screen at all, you will have a spot that you cannot get the paint through. So immediately put it in water. And then it's a good idea to wipe your tool off, your scraper off, to get as much paint off of that as possible. And if you want, you can also put that in the water to keep it from getting goopy. If you don't, you end up with a gold credit card, which is what happened here because I didn't wipe the paint off. Okay, having done that, I'm going to pull my turquoise off here, he said, expectantly. I want this to dry before I do anything with it, and so I don't want to use that particular piece. If you try and manipulate it too much before the paint dries, you can smear the paint and destroy the image and have something really, really weird that you're playing with. And my lovely assistant is taking my turquoise clay and my credit card, apparently, out of the room so I don't mess with it. Now I've got another one here, and ideally what I would do is to wrap it around. I would actually like to put another image on there, but I don't have. Oh, I'm going to do it. Let's see. What I'm going to do instead, if I can pull this loose. I did this one yesterday, and so I should be able to pop it off of here if I'm very, very careful at that. And I'm not going to get it. Never mind. He's not going to come loose, which is going to create a big problem for me later, but that's okay. Let me just show you what I'm going to do next. Take this, cut it, trim the edges up just so I don't have too much of an overlap. I'm going to start here on my jar, wrap it around. I'm going to start here on the side, get it lined up with that seam, my imaginary seam there. Get it on that side and cut down there. Now I've got a problem because I want it attached to the cap, but I also want it attached to the base. So I can, if I'm very careful, I can see right here the crack where the cap separates from the base. So I'm going to try to cut through everything. Actually, if I think about it for a minute, I can take the cap off. And now I just need to find that seam and stay with that as I cut through my silkscreened piece of clay. And I've got that piece. I want to tack it down, so I'm going to take some liquid Sculpey because I've got baked clay and unbaked clay. And so a little bit of liquid Sculpey on here. He said a little bit of liquid Sculpey on here. There we go. And tack that down. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the top piece. Goes that way. Put a little liquid Sculpey on the top piece. And attach him to the top. I can reassemble it now. He said with great expectation. I'm going to cut the excess off my silk screen. Now, normally I would decorate the back side the same way, but I only have the one silk screen, so I can't decorate the back side. So I'll leave that to your imagination. But I've now got this piece, and I should have put a lid on there as well, which I skipped that part. I can do that. I can do that. Let me take this apart. Take this. I have just broken through here. So I'm gonna have to deal with that in a minute, but one reason you want to put a lid on there is so you don't do what I just did. But having done that, we will put things back together. Put my lid on, which I really should have done. I was letting myself get in a rush, and you should never do that when doing a demo. Okay. By putting a lid on, I will seal everything in place. Now, let me state here, as I'm working on the lid and getting it sealed in place and stuck together and making sure everything is going to hold, that when you bake the lid, you really want to bake it top down, because the unbaked clay is going to tend to fall into the Inro, which you don't want. And the way to prevent that is to bake it top down so that it falls against the tile you're baking it on, and then it's not a problem. And so, having got a lid on there to hold everything in place, getting a lid on my lid, oh, that's entertaining, Bob. We'll then put this once more back on, make sure everything lines up perfectly, take that off, and I will actually bake these two pieces separately this way, because I want the lid to bake top down, so this piece, inside piece, is actually flat when it's done. Now, when it comes out of the oven, while they're still warm, put them back together to make sure they fit, and kind of let them cool together. Then you will have an Inro that fits perfectly the way it should. Okay, I haven't decorated the bottom, haven't decorated the top, and I didn't put anything on the back because I just ran out of the silkscreen clay. I would probably stamp another image on my silkscreen because that's somewhat plain, but I could stamp some butterflies or dragonflies on there or something to add some interest, or glue a little medallion on there to add some interest to it. But the next step, the last step you're going to have to do, is put a cord on there of some kind, because at least for my wife, she likes to wear this. For me, it's a little, the cord's a little small, but you need some sort of a cord. And there are two ways to do the cord. You can either drill holes through it, and if you look carefully, you can see where I've drilled holes in the cap and the lid, and then drill through the bottom and run the cord down through and back up. Or some people will put a small tube of clay on the side. So I did put a tube of clay, take this one, they would put a little tube along here. And so you just take some sort of a cord, roll the clay around it, and then put it along the side here and run your cord through it. Now, when you do that, you've got to remember that the cap's got to come off. So to get the cap off, once you've got your tube formed and tacked down and in place, and before you bake it, trust me, been there, done that. Before you bake it, you want to cut through right where that seam is so that it comes off easy. You may need to put things back together once you've cut through, like I just did, because it does tend to mash if you're using a dull blade, like I am, especially if you use the dull side of the blade like I just did. Anyway, you want them to line up so that when you're done, the cord will go through them carefully. It'll still string across the bottom. Sometimes you may want to tie the two ends together and put a little tassel on the bottom there, sometimes not. If you're going to go through the top piece, I recommend a pin vise. It's this little thing here, a little handle, got a drill bit on, you can put a drill bit in there. And you can kind of get an idea looking inside how thick the wall is. It should come through right about here. So if I if I pick a point right about here, I should be able to drill through this thing fairly quickly, like that. Now, obviously that's too small a hole. I should have used a larger drill bit, but you drill through the polymer clay rather quickly with a regular drill bit. I tried it with a diamond bit, that does not work. Similarly, I'm going to put 2 holes in the bottom, and then I've got a place to put the cord. The last thing I would mention is you will notice the cord I'm using here is kind of a braided cord. I actually make my own kumihimo. This one I made with embossing floss. No, sorry, embroidery floss. I said that, yeah, last time too. I did this with embroidery floss. This is small, so it's a 4-strand kumihimo. I think it's a 4-strand, could be an 8-strand kumihimo. Or I may have bundled 2 or 3 fibers together to get some thickness to it. It actually is a 4-strand, sorry, it's a 4-strand kumihimo with 3 to 6 strands of floss per strand on the braid. I did that so that I can actually control the color of my cord. You see the color of the cord goes really well with the colors that are in the Inro. So it matches up really nice and makes a nice, attractive piece. Anyway, those are the steps I go through to making my Inros and coming up with some nice pieces. It actually goes fairly quickly. There's 3 or 4 steps of baking, which is the biggest time-consuming factor in this. Otherwise, it's fairly easy to do, especially once I hit on the idea of using the roll of toilet paper for the base. I actually did try 3 or 4 different items. One of them I tried was to actually take some scrap clay, form it into the shape I wanted, and bake it. Although that sounds like a good idea, the biggest problem was about the 3rd time the scrap clay baked, it had quit shrinking, and the raw clay that was wrapped around it still continued to shrink, and so it tended to crack along the seam I had, which meant I was forever gluing the pieces together because of that little problem. With the rolls of toilet paper, I have not had that problem the cardboard does, well, it adapts to the stresses and shrinks a little bit, folds a little bit here and there, and helps to maintain the shape of the oval. And so with that, let me stop the recording. If I can figure out how to stop the recording. And actually, I'm just going